We are going to look at and explore the 10 cosmological powers of the universe, and in particular, seamlessness, the ground out of which all of these come. But I wanted to begin by setting the context of our discussion, and that is the withering planet. We live in the midst of an amazing life system, but it happens to be falling apart. It happens to be withering in our time. And in actual fact, it has not been this bad for millions of years. We know that now through careful study of the past. So our moment is the moment when the planet is withering, and we have got to respond to this creatively. This fact is not going to change overnight. This is going to happen throughout the planet for a long period of time. How are we going to respond creatively in the middle of all of this? That's our question. The more we look at it, the deeper it gets. And our creativity has to be in response. 20,000 species are being destroyed every year. Right? If we weren't here, right, this wouldn't be taking place. It is 100 to 1,000 times worse because we're here. So it's just overwhelming. And we have to deal with the fact that there's been nothing like this for really tens of millions of years. Here we are in the middle of that. So one way to think about our moment is that the human species is undergoing a vast transformation, something that amounts to a speciation, the birth of a new species. One of the great things about the human species is that we can give birth to a new form of humanity without changing our anatomy. We're the only species that can do that. Let's take advantage of it, right? We can do that. Let's do that. We've done that in the past. We've changed from hunter-gatherers into the Neolithic people, Neolithic into the classical, classical into modern. These are huge moments. But by far, the most radical moment was the time humans settled down. So we existed, I mean, who knows when humans first began? Do you start when we first stood up? That's 4 million years ago. Do you start when we used tools? That's 2.5 million years ago. Do you start when our brain size was its present capacity? That's 150,000 years ago. Let's pick that. So in 150,000 years, for all that time, except for recently, we moved about the planet in small groups, hunting and gathering. That's what we did. So to be human means to live like that. And then this incredible moment came when we settled down. 10, 20,000 years ago, we began to settle down into villages. Vast, vast change. Believe me, at that time, nobody wanted to do it because this wasn't like seen as a positive thing. The historians and archaeologists and anthropologists reflecting on this are convinced the only reason we made that move is because there was no way out. We were boxed in. We'd filled the planet up with humans. There weren't areas we could just enter into and to exploit for the first time. We were just boxed in. And in that intense moment, we gave birth to another form of the human, which is a neutral event in a certain sense. I mean, I'm not saying it was a good moment or a bad moment. I'm just saying it was a radical moment. And our situation historically is just like that. We're at a time when we can no longer live in this form of civilization we call industrial. If we continue this way, the destruction only gets worse. So most people who have thought about this carefully, who have the luxury to think about things carefully, have come to the same conclusion. It's a form of life that's over. So how do we move forward? And then there are a number of different proposals. And one of them is what we're exploring here. So we are at this point of impasse. It's just, if there were a way out, we would take it. That's why some people wanted space travel. It's the idea of, let's go to another planet and just keep it going. It's unlikely. So here we are. How do we move forward? One of the suggestions is this. It has to do with the understanding of our role. That's the question. What does it mean to be human? What's our role? What's our identity? These are all the same question. That, if you're a hunter-gatherer, you had an answer. And the answer is how you organized the civilization or the culture of the hunter-gatherer. Neolithic people had an answer. They knew what their role was. They knew what their identity was. It was all worked out, the whole thing. It took time, but it was all carefully worked out. And we have one in industrial society. So what if we're at a point where the role of the human is different than what we thought it was during industrial society? That's our moment. What could it mean? Where do we go? How do we proceed? Another way to say it is we have to find out what our habitat is. Now, this is not a usual way of talking, but the hunter-gatherers lived in a particular habitat, right? And then the Neolithic people entered into a different habitat. In other words, a different way of relating to the universe. That's your role, your identity. It's how you relate to the universe. The answers that are suggested here, the proposals, the vistas, the vision, have to do with identifying ourselves, not in terms of a particular region, like hunter-gatherers did, or Neolithic people. Like, we are the people of this particular place. Not just that. And also not in terms of a culture or religion, as was the case in classical civilization. And not in the terms of one's primary work or economic relationship during the modern period. Not in terms of those. What's the new identity? The new identity of the human is in terms of the planet as a whole. It's in terms of Earth and Earth's functioning. So the suggestion here is that we are a mode of the Earth, primarily. The suggestion is primordially. We're a mode of the Earth. We're a mode of the universe. It's also true we're Muslim. It's also true we're Republican. It's also true we're engineers. All these are secondary. So our time of transition is learning what it means to be planet. Not just individuals of a particular nation state, but planet. And in particular here, where we're exploring the idea that we are a way in which the powers of the universe begin to unfold freshly in a way that's qualitatively different than what has preceded in the past. That's the whole point of our reflections on the cosmological powers. The way to say it is that we are the way in which the universe proceeds in conscious self-awareness. What has preceded before, outside of conscious self-awareness, is now entering into conscious self-awareness. When anthropologists and historians reflect back on this other speciation event of humans becoming settled humans, they try to point out what the conditions were. Maybe there was a drying out of the climate, and also, I talked about before, population. Those are the conditions that led to kind of a dead end. And what is it in our case? The suggestion here is that the human has arrived at a power that was so new, it led to another kind of being. And that power is the power of language, or the power of the symbol. And this enabled conscious self-awareness and enabled the human actually to find its way around the constraints and the discipline of the enveloping community. It wasn't the intention of humans, it's what happened. We drew all the powers of the universe into ourselves. See, we're using the power of animals, we're using the power of the seed, we're using the power of the sun, we're using the power of the elements. This had never happened before in the history of the world, ever. To have all of these powers packed into this one species. And it just was overwhelming, it just exploded. And here is in a phrase, here was the problem. We were attempting to organize those powers using the mindset of a typical mammalian species. That's the challenge. Any mammalian species that had arrived at the power of symbolic consciousness would have arrived at a state somewhat similar to our own. Like, for instance, population explosion. All the mammals would love to just fill up the whole planet with their offspring. It's just what it means to be a mammal. So here we tried to organize this power using a wisdom that was too small. And so we're trying to generate ideas that will enable us to actually deal with this power. And the major suggestion is this, that we can no longer think of ourselves as just one species in the midst of the rest of the planet. Rather, we have to take seriously the idea that the very powers of the planet are unfurling within conscious self-awareness. So within this power of language, we have to take responsibility now for other species, other elements, for the vitality of the planet as a whole. And so we're thrown out, in a certain sense, of a lot of the reliable wisdom that worked for centuries. Because that wisdom was not invented to deal with the power we have now. It was invented for other reasons. So it's absolutely essential, but we need to go beyond that. And what we are attempting to here is to go to the actual universe itself, to go to the powers of the universe and ask for guidance. That might sound like a strange thing to say, that we're asking for guidance from the powers of the universe, because we, in our culture, tend to think of the universe, the powers of the universe, as beneath us. But the suggestion here is that, if you think about it for a second, these are the processes that gave birth to us. They're numinous. They're not things that we can regard as sort of just physical. They're vast. They gave birth to us. If they gave birth to us, maybe they have some contours or a shape that might help us understand who we are in the midst of all this. And so when we look at the universe as a whole, we're looking at it in terms of our most recent understanding coming out of science. And the topic today is seamlessness. And this is actually pointing at a fundamental discovery of the universe. And this is a ground of being. We've discovered something about the ground of being. It began in the early 20th century. And it was a major shock for scientists, this idea that the vacuum was full. Whenever you have words that say the opposite of what you mean, you're probably onto something, if it's true, all right? So we were saying vacuum, and what we meant by vacuum was actually vacuum. And we discovered that the vacuum was full. Okay, so there is the bottom sort of dropped out. We discovered something amazing. And the way to say it is that we discovered that this realm, we'll call the quantum vacuum, this realm actually generates being. So it's a realm that generates being. Now, a better word than quantum vacuum is pure generativity. That's a much better word. Pure generativity. Like, whoa, now you're getting somewhere. It's not a thing. It's not a place. It's a power. Just pure generativity. Another phrase that is used is, which I love a lot, space-time foam. I love that. See, we thought there were things in the universe, there were these objects and so forth, and then if you took them out, you just had nothing, you know? We didn't realize that when you took them all out, you had space-time foam. So everywhere in the universe is foaming, foaming, foaming. Right now it's foaming all over the place. There are a lot of phrases used. A zero-point energy field is another phrase that's used. But the word we're going to use is seamlessness. So seamlessness is a word pointing to the reality of the quantum vacuum. It was hypothesized in the 1920s by quantum physicists. It was measured in the 1940s. This bizarre idea that seamlessness, pure generativity, is the nature of the universe. First little amazing fact about this is that if you look at an atom has a nucleus made of protons and neutrons, and then electrons going around this atom, fundamental building block. If you look at the atom, it turns out to be, if you just do the calculations in terms of volume of the particles compared to volume of the atom, it's 99.99% empty. In other words, if you have an electron right here and you have the nucleus in here, all in between here we have seamlessness. We have the quantum vacuum. You know what's going on in there? All kinds of particles are foaming into existence and then disappearing. They foam out and they go away. They foam out and they go away. And the way we know this is because when they foam forth, we can measure their effect. We can't see them because they disappear too quickly. Sometimes they do come out and stay. But for the most part, they're foaming into existence and going away. The pure generativity, rising and falling. But so then, we are composed of atoms. So here's the amazing thing we discovered in quantum physics. We are 99.99% pure generativity. That's the nature of ourselves. Hey, I'm glad to be matter too. Fantastic. But I just want to put things in proper perspective, all right? Basically, what you are is the realm that gave birth to the universe. Now that may be hard to get used to, but try it for a while, because that's the fact. Your basic nature is the realm that gave birth to the universe. It's seamlessness. It's this incredible pure generativity. Now the reason I love seamlessness so much as a word is because it also captures something about another major discovery about the quantum vacuum. And that goes back actually to Einstein. It's an amazing story. Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen, they got together and they were scheming. You know why? They hated quantum physics. It was so counter to their worldview, because it was jumping, it was unpredictable, and it just seemed like a mess. It was statistical, and they wanted things nice and orderly and predictable, like the old days, you know. and especially Einstein is just so amazing. That's the world he wanted. He wanted things to be predictable and understood totally, and the idea of things sort of leaping forth, and it was too much for him. So he got together with his, amazing mind, and he came up with an incredible thought experiment. Now, and I'll tell you how it goes. It's just unbelievable. The deal is with quantum physics is that things remain in an indeterminate state until they interact with something, and then they make their mind up. It's like the world at the micro level doesn't yet want to decide whether or not it wants to go to the opera on Friday night. Okay, it's going to wait until like half an hour before the curtain goes up, and finally it makes up its mind. It's not going to do it ahead of time. So that you have the particles just stay in a state where all the possibilities are still open. So Einstein said, fine, here, I got one for you. Like an electron can have two different kinds of spin. It can spin clockwise, or it can spin counterclockwise, a little ball. So we call it spin up or down. So you have an electron right here. It hasn't been measured yet. So it's still hanging out in both spins. It's simultaneously spinning up and down. This is the part that Einstein hated. He wanted it to, he just so wanted the electron to have a spin up or a spin down. The idea of having both at the same time, he clearly made up his mind quickly and easily. He didn't have this difficulty with making his mind up. But I love the fact that an electron stays in between the state for as long as possible. So here's what Einstein said. You have two electrons together, all right, and they blow apart, all right? But because they were involved with the same system, then they will always take the opposite spin. So if this electron has spin up, this electron will have spin down. No disagreement on this. Everybody's happy with this. It's a common system. So then he said this. Well, what if you let them go far, far apart, all right? And then you actually test this electron over here. It has to snap into one or the other. And as soon as it snaps into, say, the up, that one is in the down. But how is it possible for that electron, which is way the heck over there, to know what happened here? Because, Einstein said, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. You know who invented that theory? Yeah, that's a special theory of relativity. So there's no way, for when this electron snaps in, there's no way that electron over there could know about this. It wouldn't know which way to snap. They can't communicate that fast. All right, they're far apart. It happens instantaneously. So Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen were really happy because they'd come up with an example that proved that quantum physics was ridiculous. You see how I mean, no one had any doubt. It's not going to snap in the same time. Come on, it's ridiculous. But there was no way of testing it. And it took decades until we developed the technological sensitivity to be able to test it. And the amazing thing is that when it was tested, they snapped instantaneously. In other words, there's a way in which the universe is interconnected. It's connected in a way that goes beyond space and time, clearly, because there's no signal going from here to there. Even though they seem like they're far apart, there's a way in which they are the same reality, connected. So there's this amazing way in which things are seamlessly involved with one another. There isn't a cut that separates those two electrons. They're simply a widely dispersed unitary event. And we're just beginning to understand what this is all about. It'll probably take a long time. But what I'm trying to get across here is that it goes outside of the normal way of thinking about the universe that we developed during the modern period. So I've said a few things about what seamlessness is. I've also said something about how each of us is primarily seamlessness. And so if that's the case, the next question is this: when are we aware of it in our experience? That's why I wanted to just float your way. And as a way of beginning to think about this, I might say that this interpretation of quantum physics is coming out of a long history, going back to Alfred North Whitehead, but celebrated most principally with the work of David Bohm, who was a student of Einstein. And it is, and Bohm's word for seamlessness, by the way, was the implicate order. Okay, so this is another powerful way of referring to seamlessness, the implicate order. And so, but the general idea in quantum physics is that, like I mentioned, electron is it's a cloud of possibilities that maintains that cloud as long as possible. So you can begin to see the universe as these clouds or bundles of possibilities. And each thing, in a certain sense, begins as a bundle of possibilities, and then it actualizes. The decisions are made, and it comes into its form. So one way of thinking about this is that each being emerges out of seamlessness. And as it emerges out of this gluey, interconnected realm of pure generativity, as it emerges out, it increasingly refines itself into one particular definite being with an ongoing collapse of possibilities into one determination. So the phrase that's real common in quantum physics is collapse of the wave function. So you just see a whole bunch of collapses, and then you have a determinate event. Now, what can happen is that you can actually wake up in the midst of that collapse as it's taking place. So, for instance, you can get lost in things like a sunset. You're just lost in the depths of things. And then all of a sudden you can come to. And in a real sense, you are bringing forth your own conscious self-awareness. It's a way in which you can actually notice the collapse taking place all around you. People have different capacities, and some people have a capacity to enter into seamlessness. easily, and for others it's something that's more rare. But one of the ways in which you can identify a person who moves into seamlessness is it's a person who is given to dreams, because the realm of seamlessness is the realm of possibility and dream. And so for people that easily hang out there, they're filled with visions and they're filled with dreams. It's the most natural thing in the world for them. Another trait of a human psyche that hovers in seamlessness is hope, because you see all the possibilities are there. And you can say it in the opposite way, is that a person who doesn't have this access to seamlessness runs the risk of collapsing into fatalism. The idea that just things are going to be the way they are because that the realm of possibility is so absent from their experience. And another really important part of entering into seamlessness is regeneration. This movement into pure generativity is the movement into where the universe is created. And so as one dissolves into it, in the next moment you are vibrantly alive with the fresh possibilities of that particular moment. So it's the need for refreshment and regeneration is met by a movement into seamlessness. But by far, I think the most important of all of the traits of a person who moves into seamlessness is that of feeling at home. Is that feeling at the where one should be, where the universe comes forth. And that too is the habitat of the human. This is where we live. We live in the birthplace of the universe. So, what I thought I'd do is to just give a quick run-through of all the powers. Just going through them one by one, just give you a feel for them, and just to emphasize the fact that all of these powers are emerging out of seamlessness incessantly, everywhere. And they're all tangled together. One leads into another from all different roots. I'm going to list them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 10. But you need to see them as like the chords of music. All the chords are played at the same time. They're all there, all at the same time. So the first is centration. This is the universe centering upon itself to give birth to a new being, a new person, a new animal, a new molecule. The universe centers upon itself to do this. You just think about your own existence. You come forth from your mother and your father. Your mother and your father came forth from your 4 grandparents. So that all of that genetic information now is present as you. So it's been compressed into you, but you go back further. You go back into the primate world, and then you realize that your lungs are formed because of fish hundreds of millions of years ago that actually gave birth to the lung. Those lungs, how to build a lung, has been remembered all this time and is now present in you. So there the fish are in you, building this lung. Of course, it's been adapted and changed. But then you go back further and you realize even the way in which we digest food, which was invented actually over 2 billion years ago, the same process, using the same molecules, is at work in us. So we have billions of years of the universe present in us, in our bodies. And then we have this energy coursing through us because we've eaten some food. We have this energy coursing through us because the sun has poured its energy out. It's been absorbed by the earth. So the sun's energy is coursing through us. The sun gets its energy from the atoms, which got their energy from the birth of the universe. Birth of the universe, the energy from that time coursing through us. The molecules, the atoms of oxygen from the stars. You see, it's incredible. The universe gathers all of itself together and gives birth to a new being. That's the power of centration. And then the second is the power of allurement. Allurement is the way in which the whole universe holds itself together. So at the level of the galaxies, we call this gravitational. The gravitational bond, it's what keeps the galaxies in their place. Because the stars are drawn to each other, gravitational attraction, they're rotating about each other. Or you go down to the level of the molecules. Then it's called the electromagnetic interaction. But our atoms and our molecules of our body are being held together by this power. And all of this we're calling the power of allurement. Even through time, you see, communities of humans are held together through time by visions and by ideas and ideals and by heart. And through time, those keep a people together and coherent. All of this together. The power that holds things together, we're calling allurement. The third cosmological power, is that of emergence. We've discovered that the universe is not a place. The universe is a story. This is the power of emergence. For a long time we thought it was a place, with all the creativity taking place at one time. Now we realize that it's an ongoing creative event. It's an ongoing creative emergent event. This power could be called creativity. We're calling it emergence. So then there's a task. How do we become the power of emergence in the form of the human? And each of these is a task. The fourth power is that of homeostasis. It's the way in which the great achievements of the universe are maintained. Homeostasis referring to the way in which a body maintains its structures. But more generally, it's the great achievements of the universe. They don't just come and go. Once the universe values its great achievements, and so it holds them together. So we have, for instance, the achievement of the oyster shell. Well, that's held together through generations and generations and generations. It's something that's really worked. And the interaction of the planet as a whole, it's enabled all this beauty to come forth. So the Earth holds together its various communities involving the atmosphere and the biosphere and the geosphere. Fifth power is cataclysm. It has to do with the way in which the universe destroys some of its achievements. And this destruction isn't, it can be accidental and random, but I'm speaking here about the way the universe systematically destroys aspects of itself. And that, in fact, creativity would not be possible without the power of cataclysm. There's a way in which this power, too, has to be entered into in the human realm. And then we come to the sixth power, synergy. And synergy has to do with complexity. One can even look at the universe as the emergence of complexity. And what we discovered is that ever more advanced forms of complexity depend upon synergy. Synergy is working together in collaborative ways to arrive at strategies that are ever more successful in the great drama of life. So synergy, cooperation, collaboration, working together, this great power in the universe. And number 7, the power of transmutation. This is the way in which the universe is impressed with what it's done, right? But it always makes demands on something new. The universe it's a self-transcending reality, so that in order for us to be, we have to adapt to new situations because the universe is changing. The universe is changing incessantly. And so we need to transmute in order to remain viable. That, of course, is a huge question in our time. Huge question. And then the related power, number 8, is transformation. Transformation is the way in which the change takes place at the level of an entire society or an entire community. So it is, I mentioned before that the universe loves its achievements, right? But it's almost as if the universe is never completely satisfied. I mean, things are great, but still they have to get better. And so transformation is the way in which the universe is is arriving at qualitatively more spectacular achievements. Number 9, the power of interrelatedness or care. It's the way in which, in the relationships in the universe, there is a dimension or a presence of something that over time evolves into what we would call care. But to extend this all the way back and to simply say that the nature, the ultimate nature of relationships has to do with nurturance and caring. And then finally, the last power, power 10, of radiance, is the way in which the universe houses magnificence. And the universe has a way of feeling its way into magnificence. And there is this amazing fact before us that with the universe arriving with the human in symbolic consciousness, we've arrived at something like a new phylum. This great phrase going back to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Anatomically, the human is just another species. But in terms of our inner powers, we are something like a new phylum. So then what is the role of this new phylum? In terms of radiance, it is the role of housing the magnificence of the universe. It's as if the universe desires to be tasted in the depths of its beauty. And the human has the capacity to actually house the depths of magnificence. In our moment, we're realizing that the human has developed so much power that it can't really contain this, using its understanding and using its accumulated wisdom in former cultures. We need all of that, but we have to go beyond that to deal with the power at this level. So we're at this moment when, right in the middle of the planet exploding in a destructive way and finding its way forward in a creative way. And the great promise of thinking in terms of the cosmological powers is that they're accessible to everyone. They're not limited to a particular culture. They're not coming out of a particular civilization. They are being developed. This understanding is being developed by people from every culture all around the planet, because we're finding a way in which the human species is actually a species. We're really beginning to understand ourselves in common terms. We're beginning to seize upon the idea that we have a role. All humans have a role, and we're united in that. And this in no way suggests the elimination of human diversity. The cosmological power of emergence favors wild diversity, so that as humans begin to discover their identity in terms of the planet and that commonality in terms of the planet, they will simultaneously explode with diversity, because the planet is so different in different places. So you have simultaneously, we will have an increase of diversity and a deepening of commonality simultaneously. But we're at the time when the human species as a whole is beginning to find its common role, and we have the excitement of being part of bringing all of that energy that is now scattered and lost in confusion and destruction. We're at that moment when we can begin to bring that energy into a coherent form focused on the well-being of the entire Earth community.